Right, hello guys, Jack here from Peach Guitars, and what I want to do today is give you a quick update on the state of Fender's USA line of guitars for 2020. Now we're going to focus today on the original series of guitars, and I want to specifically focus on the two new models that have made their way into the line for 2020, namely this American Original 60s Telecaster, which is a thin line version. There's also a 70s Tele Custom, but I also want to draw attention to some of the fantastic new finishes that have applied to the existing models too. Okay, so before I talk about the two new Telecaster guitars for 2020, let me first explain what the American Original Collection actually is. Fender unveiled this a couple of years ago and it replaced the outgoing American Vintage series. And what I think they decided to do with the original collection was basically just have a little bit of fun with their history. So the American Vintage selection was very, very particular to certain years of the models that they had. So they had, like, for example, 54 Strat, 59 Strat, and so on. And those guitars were very, very specific to recreating those exact year of production guitars. The original selection basically just broadens out the horizons a little bit. And when you look at a guitar like this, although this is a 60s Telecaster, it's got several attributes from all the guitars that they produced throughout the 60s decade, and they've piled it all into one to basically make the ultimate guitar that references that time period. Okay, so as I said before, the big news for 2020 is that there are now two additions to this fantastic lineup. Namely, we've got the 60s thin line and the 70s Tele Custom, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So as I said, this is really Fender having a bit of fun with their history, and as you can see, they've applied some fantastically kind of classic finishes. We've got surf green here with a maple neck. So you might look at this and think it's not very 1960s in any way at all, but in fact, when you consider that towards the end of the 60s, Fender were going back to maple board guitars with a smaller headstock and stuff like that, this just shows that they're mixing different elements of their past to create something that's really unique and interesting. Okay, so the best thing for me about the American Original series is that although these are vintage inspired guitars, they're not afraid to throw in a couple of modern quirks that make these guitars just more comfortable to play, basically. So these guitars are vintage spec through and through. All these guitars have Fender's Pure Vintage series of pickups, which they developed for this series basically so that whatever model they go in, they have been voiced exactly for that period of guitar. So this is a 60s Tele set of pickups. But what they have done is modernize certain features as well, as I said. So you've got a 9.5-inch fingerboard radius on all of the American Original guitars, as opposed to the 7.25 radius that you would have found on the American Vintage series. So one other thing I'll just say about the American Original series as a whole is that basically I think this is the very best step that you can take if you want to get into the realm of vintage inspired guitars without necessarily stepping up to custom shop money. And you do have some very premium features at bay here. So all these guitars have nitrocellulose lacquer finishes. They've all got, as I said, Fender's Pure Vintage, which is basically custom shop derived pickups. And in fact, they've involved their main man, Tim Shaw, who's one of the legends at Fender in the pickup department, to basically lend his own designs to this particular thin line guitar, as well as the wide range humbucker in the Tele Custom, which we'll come on to in a moment. So I just wanted to pick this up quickly as well and show you the 70s Tele Custom. I've always personally been a big fan of the later years of Fender's output of guitars as well, so I think it's great that they're turning their attention now not just to the 1950s and 60s, which were such highly revered decades for them, but also moving into the 70s where they had some very unique and interesting instruments, and they're really recreating them to the best detail that they possibly can. But as I said before, they're also throwing in some modern details that make these guitars even more usable than they ever were. Okay, so it's not just the brand new models that Fender have introduced for 2020, they've also revisited some of their classic models in the American Original series, such as the 50s Strat and 60s Strat over my shoulder, and given them some really cool finishes now for 2020 as well. So you've got the Inca Silver on the 50s Strat, you've got the Shell Pink on the 60s. They've also turned their attention back to the Jaguars and Jazzmasters too, giving those some fresh finishes as well. So I just think it makes these guitars a little bit more desirable and a bit more interesting to probably a wider selection of people. So that's it guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please leave us a like and comment down below with your thoughts as always, and make sure that you're subscribed to the Peach Guitars YouTube channel. And lastly, of course, if you want any more information about Fender's products, you can of course find out all the info that you want to know by heading over to peachguitars.com as soon as you finish this video. So thank you so much as always for watching, stay tuned, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Cheers.